Hey there everybody, welcome back to Crypt Finder. So this video is going to be all about 7 underrated, undervalued, underappreciated movies that feature ghosts. And I certainly don't have to tell all of you that there are absolute classics in this subgenre of horror. You have things like The Haunting, The Innocents, The Shining. You have the Insidious and the Conjuring universes that have a whole slew of films to them. You've got Under the Shadow, The Changeling, The Devil's Backbone, The Orphanage, and on and on and on. And it can translate not only from the very frightening all the way to the comedic side of that as well. And that's where you find things like Beetlejuice or The Frighteners or Ghostbusters. But I want to take a look at some that I don't hear people really talk about them very much, which is a real shame. And so all of these that are going to be on my list will just be ones that I think are maybe ripe for rediscovery. So come on along, let's take a look. Let's start off with at number 7. This is a bit of a controversial one, and I'll explain why. But at number 7, it is A Ghost Story from 2017. As I mentioned, yeah, it's going to be a bit divisive for people. They either seem to like it or really, really hate it, but no matter how you feel about it, I've just got to make it clear. This is not a horror film. At least not in a traditional way, right? It features a ghost, so yes, it adheres to the theme of the paranormal, but this is the only movie on this list that ended up giving me an existential crisis. This is a deeply unsettling movie that kind of runs through the cyclical nature of time and space. It's one of the most haunting films about love and loss and loneliness and the purgatory of the afterlife that I've ever seen. It's deceptively simple. A man played by Casey Affleck, recently killed in an accident, returns as a ghost to the home that he shared with his wife. And I mean, he's a ghost. His spirit slides off the slab at the morgue in the hospital wearing the sheet that he's been covered up with, and he wears that sheet throughout the remainder of the film, which is really interesting because just wearing a sheet, you can't get a whole lot of read on an actor and how they are emoting in a particular scene, and yet somehow the movie does an amazing job of showing you exactly what he's feeling and what he's going through as this earthbound spirit is tied to the place that he lived. Watching his wife, played by Runa Mari, as she begins to process all of the grief and the despair and his sense of helplessness as she finally moves on, and he's forced to remain in their home with other people and other lives coming and going through the years without being able to interact or control the situation or the environment. And frankly, it's just heartbreaking. I don't want to tell you too much about this movie because it's either going to resonate with you or it's not. Some people are going to enjoy it. Other people are going to say, I don't get it. It's slow. I'm just watching a guy in a sheep for 90 minutes, which is totally fair. But I think if you're like me, if you're just morbidly sentimental, then you might find it a little bit more sweeping and grand and compelling. It is a very solid meditation on loneliness and grief. It's directed by David Lowery. It's a very quiet, contemplative type of movie, and I think you need to know that going into it. So if you're up for it, give it a shot and see what you think. I'm going to just warn you just a little bit. This is not a good film if you have a short attention span. It is paced very, very slowly and deliberately. So I would also just say probably not a good movie to watch if you've recently lost someone, a family member or a friend. It's going to churn up way too many emotions. I'll just leave everybody with this. It is a movie about loss, about those that we love and those that we lose. It's about memory, it's about grief, and it is ultimately about making the very, very difficult decision to just let go. At number 6, we have The Canal from 2014. This is directed by Ivan Kavanagh, and there is absolutely a reason that so many films deal with ghost as metaphors for some type of internal conflict or their characters sliding into madness, because playing with the idea that you can't be sure what you are seeing is real for a character or for a viewer, that's one of the most intriguing parts of this subgenre. So you see it time and time again. Are we watching reality, or are we watching a character who's becoming so unglued they're becoming an unreliable narrator, and so much is tied up in them, their psyche, their turmoil, their encroaching insanity, that we ultimately can't really trust the images on the screen. In this film, David Williams and his family have moved into an old home by a canal. He's a film archivist and begins to suspect that his wife might be cheating on him, and this paranoia is compounded by learning the house was the site of a brutal series of murders, and he begins having visions that are leading him deeper into questioning everything around him. I know people are going to go into this one expecting a certain type of film, and I'm just going to say it is a fine line to walk here. The filmmakers go for some of the usual tropes, so yep, that's to be expected. But also, there are some bits to this one that make it so much more suspenseful and atmospheric and creepier than some other films of the same ilk. Okay, so don't go in expecting a classic, but I think you're going to have a good time. The pacing is very slow, but the performances, especially by Rupert Evans as David, it's really good. And the creeping sense of dread throughout this one, I think it makes it worth your time. At number 5, we have from 2013, Oculus. A lot of people are going to know this particular movie because Mike Flanagan, who directed this film, his career is just shot through the stratosphere, and people have gone back and rediscovered some of his early work, and this is one of them, and it has those classic Mike Flanagan touches to it. So if you haven't seen it, I do think it's worth your time. It's a pretty simple setup, I would say. It's about a haunted object, and in this case, a mirror, but I do think that it's very underrated and enough people just don't talk about it. This story is about siblings Kaylee and Tim who believe this antique mirror is responsible for the tragedies that they've endured in their lives and the death of their parents as well. Tim is recently released from an institution, and Kaylee has leveraged herself at an auction house to be able to install the mirror in the family home so she and her brother could document any of the supernatural occurrences that are going to happen. And very smart, she's actually installed a kill switch here. There's an anchor weighted up to the ceiling that just at a press of a button, boom, it would come down and destroy this mirror. You should expect events in this movie to play out over 2 time periods interwoven to tell the story of what ultimately happened in the past and then what's also going on in the present. If you're sort of on the line, like, is this really a movie about ghosts? I hear you. I can sort of see your point there. It is about a haunted object, though, and throughout the film, yeah, definitely expect there are going to be visions, hallucinations, ghostly appearances, but the story really hooks you and keeps you engaged throughout. So, yeah, I think it still stands as a film that features ghosts. If you avoided this one just because you thought this might play out a little bit like Mirrors, that movie from 2008 with Kiefer Sutherland, Oculus is a much better movie. It's much more well paced and a really intriguing good time. At number 4 is Ghost Stories from 2017. This film is actually based on the play that was written by Jeremy Dyson and Andy Newman. It's a wonderfully atmospheric film. Andy Newman actually plays the same role that he played on stage. He's reprising this role here as Dr. Philip Goodman, a very lonely man. He makes his living debunking psychics and debunking supernatural events. And he receives an invitation from a childhood hero and inspiration of his, a man named Charles Cameron, who's been missing for years now. Cameron is the reason Goodman went into this field of study, and he accepts the assignment provided by an ailing Cameron to investigate 3 cases, just 3, where he could not find any sort of scientific explanation, and he really wants him to determine, Are these really supernatural events, or can they be explained away? The basic setup is it's a horror anthology with a wraparound story that won't be unfamiliar to horror fans who know the work of Amicus or Hammer Productions. It still sort of twists its way to a nice conclusion here, though. The three ghost stories presented are all very well done. The pacing is just an expert exercise in restraint. And that's not to say that there aren't payoffs. There are, but the creepy build is done so well here. You might find yourself more unnerved by those subtle, quiet moments than the ghostly reveals. The mark of a really good film for me is not that I liked it right after I finished it, but how much I think about it in the weeks and months and sometimes years afterward. And this movie did that for me. So I think, yeah, you should give it a try. Number 3 is The Entity from 1982. Barbara Hershey stars as a woman named Carla Morgan who has experienced physical and sexual abuse in her life and then subsequently begins to be targeted by a supernatural force. The increasingly horrific attacks on Carla actually feature her being raped, beaten, bitten throughout this, and the tonal shifts of long places where everything kind of grinds to a halt as characters weigh in on what psychological issues might be manifesting themselves outward versus if there are real supernatural forces that are legitimately waging war on this poor woman and her family, are then punctuated by sudden, violent outbursts when this spirit attacks. This can be a tough film to watch, and if you are overly sensitive or if rape is a trigger, then yep, you should avoid this particular film. However, yeah, if you're up for it, if you're up for that challenge, it's an odd Hollywood film, especially for the time period. There's no happy ending here. No absolute resolution, no overall explanation that is concrete on what the main character is experiencing. It's totally open to interpretation, which is one of the things that makes it so interesting. At number 2 from 1981, we have the movie Ghost Story. This is adapted from Peter Straub's very classic novel of the same name, and it really follows four elderly gentlemen. They formed a group called the Chowder Society, and they gather to tell horrific ghost stories only to discover the most painful secret that they all share. It's come back to haunt them all. The cast is a huge draw for this film. You have Fred Astaire, John Houseman, Melvin Douglas, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Alice Krige. The film moves at a different pace than films today, and while Straub's book allows for much more fleshed out events and characters, the movie does a fine job of at least scratching the surface of what's there and making it still pretty intriguing. This film does not go as deep as the novel does, so I feel like if anybody out there has any pull whatsoever, yeah, a multi-episode series of this novel would be fantastic. Just seems like the time has come for a rediscovery of sorts of Peter Straub's work. The great atmospheric locations of this wintry town are really nice. The acting is good, not only in the present day situation, but also the flashbacks into the past. All of that works very well. The special effects by Dick Smith are fantastic. As expected, if you know Dick Smith at all and some of his incredible, groundbreaking work, yep, exactly the same here. It's the movie would be lost without his effects. The music is sometimes a little over the top here. It feels like that there should have been a more quiet, kind of haunting vibe to it. But the score, which is by Philippe Sardet, is sometimes it's just too dramatic, too jarring. It takes you out of the moment instead of firmly planting you in that situation. And perhaps instead of like a full orchestra, just something quiet and unnerving, maybe that would have boosted the creepiness, but still well worth a watch. So finally, we're down to number 1, and it is Session 9 from 2001. I actually sort of debated putting this one in here, and it's not because it's not a really, really great movie. I would tout it any chance that I got. But I don't know. Is it about Ghost or not? Yes, you would be right to ask that because technically, I guess it isn't a film about Ghost. But on the other hand, it's a movie that's about guilt and grief and how the impact of that haunts people. So There is a haunting of sorts by something, and that's kind of the beauty of this film, not unlike The Shining. One reading is it's all just madness on the part of an individual. The other possibility is, yeah, there's a malevolent force that's not necessarily the cause of the situation, but it's still there. It's lingering. It exploits any pain and uses that to squirm inside the mind of the characters and twist what they are seeing and what they are not. I'm trying to be vague here because I think this is a much better movie if you go into it knowing as little as possible. I have had some people tell me, though, that they didn't understand the movie, and the only real justification I can give for that is this is not a great film to try to multitask. You really have to devote your time and attention into this movie to get out of it what it's trying to say. I saw this movie on cable. It was probably around 2002. I happened to wake up in the middle of the night, and I came into the middle of this film, and I was absolutely riveted, just on the edge of my seat. It was dark. It was quiet. Again, it was in the middle of the night. And once I finished it the next day, I went immediately to Blockbuster. Remember when that was a thing? I, rented the DVD. I watched the whole thing all over again because I had to know what I had missed in the beginning of the film because, again, I was just totally sold by this movie. Now, yeah, granted, the atmosphere when I watched it alone in the dark has somewhat of a different vibe to it than maybe if you're going to watch it in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, but I absolutely love the movie. The film stars David Caruso, Josh Lucas, and Peter Mullen. It was directed by Brad Anderson. Mullen plays Gordon Fleming. He runs an asbestos removal company and just desperate to keep his whole company afloat. He's got mounting pressures at home and with the business, and he agrees his team can clean out this abandoned Danvers State Hospital in 1 week. One of the crew members, Mike, he finds a series of audio recordings of different sessions from a patient named Mary Hobbs back when the hospital was thriving. And he begins playing all of these audio tapes, and he's listening to Mary, who suffers from dissociative identity disorder. And she has several very distinctive personalities, but it's not until the 9th recording, session 9, when a certain manifestation comes out by the name of Simon. Meanwhile, strange and unsettling things begin happening to the remainder of the crew. Session 9 is a movie, I think it's everything you would want from a ghost story. It's slow, it's creepy, you've got lots of shots of long hallways and stairwells, and the only thing it maybe doesn't have, a ghost? I don't know. It's not an easy answer. It's pretty subjective here. Maybe there are no ghosts in the film, or maybe it's more about the fact that pain and trauma can linger in a certain place and almost take on a presence of its own that can persist even long after the death of the host. If you're looking for a haunting experience that blurs the line between psychological horror and the supernatural, yep, Session 9 is a must-watch.
Hello, Gordon.
Cody? It's me, man. Come on.
So that'll do it, everyone. Those are 7 underrated movies about ghosts that I think you should definitely check out. If you've seen these movies, please let me know what you think about them down below. And if there are some undervalued, underappreciated ghost movies that you think I left off this list, let me know that as well. Please hit the subscribe button so you can always be notified when I drop a new video. And until next time, everyone, stay curious and stay scared.